Okay, good day to you guys. My report is all about the structure of effective governance of disaster response networks and especially insights from the field, by Noel Branda. Okay, so first, let me give you the credentials, kung gaano po kagagaling ng mga authors na to. Okay, by the way, Branda Noel is trained as a community organizational psychologist who studies governance and coordination within multi-agent systems organized in response complex problems. So, kaya nga po transboundary crisis, magaling po siya dito. Of course, Toddy Stillman is a policy scientist who focus on the role of science, policy, and decision-making in various contexts. So, dito na po natin makikita paano natin magagawa ng policy, okay, yung transboundary crisis. And of course, last but not the least, is that Xing Yang is an assistant professor in the Department of Public Administration and Public Policy in California State University, Dominguez Hills. So dito na po natin makikita yung beauty of public administration and how to respond and build a structure or a policy in terms of having an effective governance in terms of disaster or what we say as transboundary crisis. By the way, let me give you the glimpse po of the abstract po ng report na to. So ever since talaga, there is a significant debate about the appropriate governance. Ano ba talaga yung appropriate governance structure in terms of disaster response, especially po transboundary crisis? So siguro, of course, we are familiar about COVID-19, of course. Okay, so naapektuhan tayo nito. Meron yung isang video, it's all about the speech of Donald Trump. The president, Donald Trump of the America. Sabi niya, by 3 months, mawawala na daw yung COVID, which is one of the example of transboundary crisis. Pero walang nangyari. So dito po natin malalaman gaano talaga kahirap humanap ng structure, pattern, or having that policy in effective governance in terms of disaster. Okay? Disaster response exhibit both network and hierarchical characteristics. One challenge in the field of disaster management is how to structure a response that reconciles the need. So, paano tayo makakagawa talaga ng structure para makaresponde tayo sa need in terms of transboundary crisis, How to be flexible, and to mutually adjust operations quickly to change conditions para meron tayo talagang maitulong. Okay? So, we then analyze this model to identify a set of propositions concerning the network structure kasi kailangan talaga natin ng structure. Okay? And governance of effective incident response relative to 4 key network capabilities. First of that is that rapid adaptation and response to changing conditions, management of distributed information, of course, bilateral coordination, and emergent collective action. So, ano po yung laman ng study po nila Noel and of course Stillman. So, sa study po nila, yung ginawa po nila doon, yung context po nila sa study nila is that it's all about wildfire. Kasi nga, isa din sa mga characteristic talaga ng transboundary is that it is jurisdictional and having political and of course time. Kasi nga, sometimes kasi sa US kasi to na context nila, sometimes kasi yung wildfire sa kanila is that ang tagal mawala and sometimes dumadaan pa siya or sometimes pumupunta pa yung wildfire sa other jurisdictions. So kumbaga, problema talaga nila yung wildfire. According dito, so kailangan talaga makaresponde sila in terms of evacuation, road closure, transportation system restoration. So dito dinidetermine nila po, this is a study context, okay? Yung jurisdictional borders. Especially which can include private, municipal, country, state, and of course, federal. And of course, sinali din nila dito is that the organizational structure of IMTs exemplifies top-down. So, ano ba yung command? Saan ba nanggagaling in terms of this crisis? Now, let us take note, hindi lang po ito yung simpleng crisis na kumbaga barangay lang nagre-responde, okay na. This is, and we are talking here about transboundary crisis. Okay, so, dito din po na nalalearn sa study context na to is that the incident command organization may include personnel o iba-ibang mga personnel na po yung of course nakikita din sa study context nila dito is that how they look leadership in coordinating across operational domains under different jurisdictions. Okay, so method nila dito, no, dito sa kanila is that, of course, it's all about transboundary in wildfire. So, dito nila nakikita kung paano ba nila nakikitaan ng network, no, how different officials or different positions do coordinate, like deputy, liaison, giving information, operations and logistics, and of course, planning and safety. Okay, so importante dito po sa method nila, no, kumbaga kumuha sila ng mga batikan, no, batikan magresponde sa ganitong mga kaso in terms of transboundary crisis. So, ito po, meron silang magagaling in terms of complexity, nilevel nila sa experience ng mga tao nagre-responde, maybe sa atin dito mga, in terms of sa mga fire, no? So, diyan, nakikita nila, ginamit nila yung mga taong to as informants. So, saan ba kumukonekta yung mga networks or connections or yung structure? Sino ba yung re-responde? In terms of boundary ba? Sino yung pupunta dyan? At ano yung steps na gagawin nila? So, ganito po talaga kakomplikado tong report na to kasi we are talking here about complex, not just in crisis, but in a transboundary crisis. Okay? So, ito na po yun, no, ang mga key network capabilities na dapat meron yung isang having effective, no, response, no, rapid adaptation and response to changing condition. Okay, dapat there is an adaptation or kumbaga flexibility. And of course, management of information talaga. And of course, importante dito yung coordination. Kaya nga may mga times pa talaga no na in terms of pag-responde, hindi nagko-coordinate yung mga agency, nagkakabuhol-buhol yung operation, sometimes yung trabaho ng isa, nako-cross ng isa. And of course, collective action, no, para may maitulong talaga. Okay, so introduction tayo, no? Disaster response is a network enterprise. There continues to be a growing appreciation for the network character of many public management contexts, according to Toll 2015, particularly around intervention in complex problem domains that are beyond the scope of any single organization. So, totoo po talaga, no, hindi po talaga natin masasabi na that's why during a complex disaster, no individual, no, yung example ko, di ba si Trump, sabi niya 3 months lang daw yung crisis ng COVID sa Amerika, walang nangyari, okay? Organization or agency has the jurisdictional authority or legitimacy or resource technical capability to effectively assume hierarchical command and control to the entirety of the response. Kaya nga po lahat magtulungan. Di ba nga sa COVID natin dito in the Philippines, hindi lang po tayo yung sumolve dito. A lot more of nations, no, nagbigay sila sa ating ng mga knowledge in terms na mag-improve yung research, paano ito maagapan, and of course, obviously the vaccine. Okay? I hope it's understood. And ano ba yung Incident Command System or ICS? Yet, strong characteristic of hierarchy are also present through the application of the Incident Command System. ICS, according to Moynihan, 2008. ICS is a command patrol tool. It is used as tool that is used to coordinate a network response in almost all disasters. It is ICS. Incident Command System, yet strong characteristic, are also present through the application of the Incident Command System. ICS is a command and control tool that is used to coordinate network response in almost all disasters. So, there's a lot of debate na po dito, no? There is a significant debate about the appropriate governance. Ano ba talaga yung structure, response na meron yung isang agency or isang country to say, no? Curiously, where scholars generally agree that incident response is not well characterized as hierarchy, no? According to this, to Comfort and others, but both theory and practice dedicate significant attention to understand and developing more elaborate system to command and control, especially transboundary crisis. Actually, there are two schools, or there are two ideas, there are two paradigms in disaster scholarship. This has led to two competing schools of thought or paradigms or ideas in disaster scholarship according to Ansel 2010 and et al. First is that the centralized control and the emergent coordination. So ano ba yun sila? So ang centralized control is one continues to emphasize the need for centralized control. Kumbaga nakasentro lang yung control sa isa. And views negative outcomes of disasters as inadequacies in command. So ito po yung sabi niya, no? Inadequacies in command. Furthermore, scholars propose that the crisis nature of a disaster means that some form of centralization is often required for effective response po. Okay? So next naman is the emergent coordination. Okay? So the other side emphasizes the importance of lateral emergent coordination and argues that failures in disaster response are often consequence of centralized versus decentralized. So kaya nga po sometimes there are a lot of agencies, they want decentralization kasi nga para makagalaw talaga sila. Because oftentimes it is seen as failures. Kasi nga may mga times na sa sobrang centralized, hindi ka agad nakaka-responde yung agency. Kasi parang centralized nga, bureaucratic masyado. So paradox dito is that practical and theoretical challenges arise from tension between emergence of spontaneous or interorganizational collaboration and the need to establish an order emergency response under stressful conditions, something Munihan has called the crisis management paradox. So ano yung different structural configurations of networks? Networks have been associated with greater performance in different settings. As stated by Toll, there is a great deal no left unknown about the ways in which network and networking behavior. So, it is quite unknown. Kaya nga hindi talaga tayo makapagsabi na I can solve this problem. We can solve this transboundary in 3 months. We cannot say that something, no? Okay? So, the study of network structure focuses on identifying and understanding the consequences of enduring patterns of interaction within defined domain. Of course, we have here the one of the attributes is that environmental attributes. First, while there are exemptions in communities that has an unusual exposure of disaster risk, most major disasters are relatively unknown events in their lives. So, may mga times po talaga na ganyan, hindi natin ma-predict yung mga pangyayari. Second, significant disasters are by definition both complex and dynamic. Pabago-bago. Consequently, the incident response network as a whole must be able to maintain integrity of response while continually transforming of formerly peripheral or uninvolved actors become more central. Dapat po talaga magtulungan. Last, significant disasters are inevitably characterized by a high degree of distributed information and goal interdependence across jurisdictions and operational domains. So we have here capabilities of incident response network. So we have illustration here, it's a requisite. Capacities of high-performing incidents. So ito po yung mga requisite, Dapat may bilateral coordination, emergent collective action, rapid adaptation, yung nauna pong nasabi natin, and distributed information management. Collectively, this set of conditions suggest a number of capabilities that an incident response network must possess effectively. So dapat, ito po yung mga characteristic meron yung isang response network, okay? Coordination, collective action, adaptation, being flexible, and of course, having that information managedly distributed. Okay? So first, in light of the often chaotic, ito po yung unpredictable nature of disaster, the network as a whole must have flexibility. Okay? Kaya po yung sinasabi natin, to rapidly adapt to changing conditions. So yung keyword po dyan, dapat flexible by adjusting to variations in network composition structure. The second is that the network must be able to manage distributed information. Okay, so understandable naman po, Third is the actors intervening in the theater or operation must be able to bilaterally coordinate. So coordination, okay? Lastly is beyond just, staying out each other's way, high-performing incident response network must be able to act collectively. So meron po tayong flexibility, dapat, sa isang response network, and managedly distributed information, and of course, collective action or coordination, and of course, collective action, okay? And we have 4 prominent whole network structure. First is the dense or closed network, referred to a network in which there is a high level of connectivity. So, high level of connectivity dapat. Conversely, highly centralized network, at their most extreme link, members together exclusively through their connections to single centralized actor. Okay? Dapat centralized actor lang po. Next is decentralized or brokered networks are networks characterized by presence of subgroups. Meron mo subgroups kasi nga decentralized na po, hindi na po centralized. That are connected. Pero konektado naman po. Even though it is decentralized, but since it is connected, we can attain unity there. Finally, a fourth network structure gaining scholarly attention is that a core periphery network. Dapat po may core periphery network. So, ito po yung tinatawag na having 4 network structures. First, we have here, centralization, closure, brokerage, and periphery. So, kahit po iba-iba siya ng structure, but then, one of the things na makikita natin dito is that interconnectedness. Okay? So, network administrative organization or NAO. A NAO is an administrative entity whose sole purpose is the coordination of network. So, yan yung po yung NAO. Applies the logic of NAO to disaster response context, arguing that IMTs governed by ICS are appropriately characterized as NAO in disaster response networks, and network dynamics shape how well ICS function on an incident. Okay? So, kumbaga, kung yung NAO talaga, nakaporma na siya, no, nakadetermine po dyan, no, how response ng isang agency in a disaster. And approaches to network structure theory building concerning network structure during disasters can be approached in different ways. So, compares different characteristics of different disaster responses networks against reports of network performance in an attempt to identify those characteristics more common in higher performing networks. Collective mental models naman po, research method, an alternative approach adopted here is inductive in nature. However, it is not our induction concerning the most effective network that are initial interest to us. Rather, we analyze the collective mental models of 25 of some. So, yan na po yung sinasabi ko na nag-analyze ng 25 models na yung mga magagaling na IMT sa US, and then they serve it as an informant. So, tinitignan nila doon in terms of coordination, how the information was managed. So, yung sinasabi ko po, no, na the active coordination, how the information is managed, and of course, flexibility. Doon po nila na attest and nakagawa po sila ng proposal kung paano mag-compose ng structure in disaster response. Study context po, no, most empirical advances, so takes place. So, yun na po yun yung nasabi ko, no, about sa kanila, no. Study about disaster have been grounded at least initially in case studies, one particular type of disasters na naman. So, it's all about wildfire kasi yung pinukusa nila, no, complex, no. So, doon nila, yun po yung study context nila, no. Inistudihan nila yung mga IMTs na yun, that serve as informants. So, tinanong nila, no, in terms of this crisis, no, in terms of complexity, in equivalence, no, sa experience ng mga taong yon, nakita nila doon paano sila mag-coordinate, how the information is managed based on the structure and networking. And doon din nakita kung ano yung effective. Okay? So, method nila dito, no, is to develop a structural model of an effective incident response network to transboundary wildfire or let's say crisis, no. We engage in two phases. First phase is that we started to list the actors, no, and units who have leadership responsibilities. Now, of course, those people are leaders since we are talking here about administration or different domains of incident response operation must be coordinated. The rest of the network for the incident managed. Findings nila dito, no, so our first step in analysis was to create social network map that graphically depicted the structure when all critical ties across all responders were considered in aggregate. According to 25 ICS, no, ito yung sinasabi ko, an effective incident response network structure look as shown in figure 3. Okay, so makikita po natin yung figure. Graphical depiction of network are an important first step of theory building. So ito po yung importante, ito po yung findings nila. As provide an easily accessible tool for discerning the general structure of network. So, they provide this a tool, no? So, figure 3 offers several important insights into critical networks as perceived by ICS. So, ito na po yun, no? So, this is how, no? So, of course, kasali po dyan yung local government. Okay, disaster response operation. May mga agency dyan, no? And of course, fire operations, no? Agency, and of course, media. And dyan po, pumapasok yung mga connection, information flow. So, ang dami po, IMTs po. Although, nandito siya, pero saklaw niya po yung medyo naman, no? And betweenness, kailangan po talaga ng betweenness centrality according to Prima 1979. It speaks to which actors, workers, connection between two otherwise disconnected others. So, even though these are independent structure, ito sila, but still, they must have the betweenness centrality and, no, dapat hindi po sila disconnected. No, dapat mag-connecta po yan sila so that they can respond, no, actively talaga, having flexibility sa may possible na mangyayaring transboundary crisis. Okay, so it is just, so if you are going to summarize this structure or figure, we can here now assess, no, how the information flow, how they can act, on how authority, top down by or bottom must first begin. Is it centralized or decentralized? Okay, ganun po yung nangyayari dito. But yung pinaka-importante daw, there must be a connection. Okay? Keyword, connection. Discussion, no? The present study provides an empirical foundation for theory building concerning what characteristic of network structure might be associated with effective incident response to disaster. And it also illuminates some of the limitations of current models of incident response governance. Practically, current practices in network governance on complex incidents tend to rely on models and tools of governance designed to produce either highly centralized networks or highly decentralized, dense networks or communication. Centralized structure, emergent coordination, and having core periphery network yung kailangan. So ano yung if NDS centralized structure? It is on the centralized end, the command organizational structure that is the hallmark of the ICS is hierarchical in nature with significant attention given to chain of command. Dapat talaga there is still a chain of command, reporting structure, and span of control. Dapat kontrolado pa rin, no? Even though centralized. And of course, it has coordination, importante yan, no? On the other end of the spectrum, prominently use of tools coordinating laterally such as cooperator meetings and conference calls likewise been found problematic. Why? These approaches generally are associated with denser network structure that has been criticized for being cumbersome and easily overwhelmed by number of actors. So, sometimes sa sobrang dami, no, mas hindi po daw nakaka-coordinate. Ganun po yung nakikita ng mga nipipa. So, of course, it must have core periphery networks. So, tulad nito po, may mga networks. As such, we turn our discussion to examine the attributes of the observed core periphery network with an eye toward considering the consequences of this identified network structure for disaster response in general. Okay, so what does all this suggest for management and governance of complex disasters? So ano po ibig sabihin nito? One of the significant conundrums in the field of disaster management is how to structure a response in a manner that, so paano po ba? No, how? Ano po yung mga tanong? In a manner that reconciles needs for centralized coordination among the array of responders involved. Why? Retaining flexibility. Even though there is a centralized, there must be coordination. But yung pinaka-challenge dyan, mariretain ba ang flexibility to mutually adjust operations quickly to changing conditions on the ground as well as scale up to incorporate new actors. And incident response can vary in terms of how the system as a whole leverage hierarchical command and control versus lateral coordination type relationship. Findings from the present study suggest that some important new direction in creating governance structure at a whole network level that can effectively manage the needs for both functional differentiation as well as cross-functional integration. So we begin with the assertion that complex disaster will necessitate dual needs for both centralized and emergent coordination as well as the ability to network to integrate new actors into existing operations. Our data revealed a modified core periphery structure which is supported by network theory as uniquely capable of balancing these two operational needs. Thus, we begin with the following proposition. Ano yung mga proposition na dapat meron? The first proposition is that, number 1, incident response during complex disaster will be more effective when organized into a more modified core periphery structure relative to more integrated or centralized network structure. Okay, dapat may core periphery. Proposition number 2, effective incident response network during complex disaster will be characterized by higher connectivity within operational subgroups regardless of agency affiliation outside core, higher connectivity. Proposition number 3, the effectiveness of the core periphery disaster response network will be dependent upon the capability of brokers to facilitate information flow between the core. So, importante po talaga yung pag-flow ng information in terms of this crisis. Proposition number 4, when a now or led organization is brought in from the outside to manage the network, effective incident response will be increased by presence of local actors in the core. Number 5, as incident complexity increases, the size and heterogeneity of core members will need to increase to maintain functionality. Proposition 5a, size and heterogeneity of the core will have a curvilinear relationship to network performance. B, when the heterogeneity and size of the core become inefficient for coordinating operations, coordinating failures will increase unless the network restabilizes into subcore periphery structure. Okay, and conclusion po natin dito. Okay, we are already in our conclusion and directions for future research. Although there is general sentiment among scholars and managers alike that understanding network is vital in understanding management of complex disaster, our progress in this area is hampered by a dearth of models that can inform hypothesis testing concerning the characteristic of effective incident response networks. But without validated models that provide a point of reference for comparison, no, kailangan talaga natin ng point of reference whether we like it or not. We are limited in our ability to learn from the critical analysis of actual disasters. So this journal talaga or article ni Noel indeed helpful to start having a proposed social network so that we can respond in a disaster. The present study takes an important steps in identifying a set of testable propositions concerning an effective network structure for balancing often competing needs for centralized coordination and emergent coordination. Okay? So, yun lang, no? And thank you and may God bless you all.